Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Happy Thursday, and I'm in a reasonably pleasant mood for a change. How about you?
Really? Look at how big the smile is. This is great. Okay, well, if you're in a good mood, I'm in a good mood. Maybe you're going to be in a good mood towards Biden because I know he's on your radar again. So tell the people what is fully on your radar.
Yeah, that's a big negative there. Negatory. Who is most responsible for the Biden White House's desperate and undemocratic efforts to shield President Joe Biden's cognitive decline from the people? Well, two very different sources have reached the same conclusion. Former First Lady Dr. Jill Biden is perhaps the chief villain of the story. That is according to Original Sin, the new book by mainstream journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, and also according to David Hogg, who was recently recorded by conservative undercover journalist network Project Veritas. Let's start with Hogg. The following video footage comes from Project Veritas, right-wing media group founded by James O'Keefe, though he was eventually ousted from it. Project Veritas specializes in obtaining surreptitious recordings of staffers who work in Democratic political organizing and liberal media and publicizes the things they reveal about their employers. Project Veritas obtained video of David Hogg, vice chair of the DNC, and also another Dem staffer, putting the responsibility for the cover-up on Biden's inner circle, particularly Jill Biden's chief of staff, Anthony Bernal. Let's watch this.
The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress you enough.
Like Jill Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Jill Biden's chief of staff.
That was like an open secret at the time. Like I would avoid him. Like he was scary.
What was his name?
Anthony Bernal.
I've never seen him.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
He's like a shadowy, like Wizard of Oz type figure.
So some thoughts. First off, look, it's not always necessary to record people without their knowledge in order to get the inside scoop. Hogg has actually been castigating the Democratic Party lately, as well as its failed electoral strategy, which has caused Gen Z, particularly Gen Z males, to move to the right. The DNC is actually trying to remove him from power in order to appease an irate Native American activist woman who thinks that his vice chair election was rigged against her, which is kind of crazy. I think he might have just honestly assessed what he sees as the problems with the Biden White House if he was asked about it in a straightforward fashion. But I digress. Now that's because it's not really a secret anymore. In fact, the Original Sin book, which I'm now most of the way through, chiefly identifies these same figures, Jill Biden and her chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, as the main bad actors in this sordid tale. According to Tapper and Thompson, Dr. Jill was initially opposed to her husband running for president, but after she got on board, she really got on board, and she took dramatic steps to protect him at all costs. Indeed, important decisions related to both governance and campaigning were made by an incredibly small group of top aides nicknamed the Politburo. These aides were incredibly loyal to the Biden family and humored the family's need for privacy and also secrecy. Bernal, the Jill Biden chief of staff, had tremendous power over personnel. Basically, you didn't go along with the approach, you were out of there. So when it came time to make the decision about whether Biden should run for re-election, well, that decision was made without any input whatsoever from pollsters or campaign consultants or Biden's cabinet, let alone the voters. It was made by the Biden family, who were in wild support of Joe seeking another term. You weren't allowed to question it. Frankly, it scarcely occurred to anyone that they should question it because you don't question Joe and you don't question Jill. This book, which I really recommend to people, it is fascinating to see just how shielded Biden was. I think I imagined a large number of people in on this conspiracy to keep Biden out of the public's eye, but it's actually just 3 or 4 people. Donlin, Ricchetti, Anita Dunn, and then Jill Biden and Hunter Biden. Keeping Biden away from the cabinet themselves. Cabinet secretaries, top Democratic officials couldn't get meetings with Biden. They did everything they could to limit his, not just his public appearances, but how many appearances he was doing with other leaders in the Democratic Party. And that decision came from Joe Biden himself and Jill Biden and these top people. And then the decision to run for re-election, they never sat in a room and decided, okay, here are the strengths and weaknesses of you having an additional campaign at this advanced age with your age and inflation being top concerns of voters. They never had that meeting. Joe Biden and Jill Biden decided, well, of course he's running for re-election. That was told to these 3 or 4 people, and Ron Klain included, and then that was that. There was no polling even done. It's really astonishing how how insular this family, how much it's about protecting the Biden family. All these top aides viewed their role as that they were responsive, not obviously not to the American people, but not to the Democratic Party, but to the Biden family. It's a family affair. It's really interesting. I did not know the extent to which the Biden family had made protecting them, and then that explains all of the Hunter-related decisions. Really, why didn't they distance themselves from Hunter? Why didn't they ever throw him to the wolves? Why did they all show up to his trial? They didn't put any distance between them and Hunter as all of his legal episodes were unfolding. Well, from reading this book, I understand that never would have even occurred to them to do that because he's part of the family, and they protect the family. They were mad at other members of the family who were talking to the public. You don't betray the family. You don't talk to the public. You don't separate yourself from the family. And the most prominent member of the family being Jill Biden.
I love today's radar. I think this is brilliant. Let me tell you why. Conservative media should understand this was not some huge Democratic cover-up. This is what I've been saying. This was a chief villain that we're calling Jill Biden, but she's also a protective wife. So if you think about what she was doing, she's just protecting her husband, somebody who wasn't on board with the idea of it in the beginning, came fully on board, and then did not want him to get the criticism of not being able to lead because she's seen him in his lowest times be resilient. And she truly believed that he can do it again and wanted to shield him from any criticism because she thought that was a better option than President Trump. So that was a huge miscalculation by a loved one, not a huge Democratic cover-up. And I love that. I can accept that. We can look inwards and see what the problem was and just say, okay, all these people that were criticizing and bothering about this every day, Elizabeth Warren, others, they're not involved with this. They were shut out and iced out of the entire conversation, which I think should redirect a lot of the criticism of mainstream media and all these other, people that are on the chopping block for this, something that they had nothing to do with. They also were trying to figure out what was actually going on. Obviously, where there's smoke, there's fire. So something was going on, but because no one had access besides family members, you remember after that terrible debate performance, you know who Joe Biden went to Camp David with? His family members.
Right.
That's it. And NBC reported that they did a meeting about what the next step should be, and people were critical of, like, why would your family be the only ones involved in that meeting? And he said it wasn't for that. This is unequivocally false. But then we know he made the decision to drop out soon after that. I think that's what we have, is that family protecting family and not worried about maybe what's best for the country. So it was a gross miscalculation on their part, but not some huge cover-up. And I'm happy with that solution and to keep looking into it.
Huge in terms of consequential, maybe huge, not huge in terms of how many people were straightforwardly involved. Yes, you're right. Still think Democrats and Democratic leaders and the cabinet officials can be criticized for not going public for when they were repeatedly told you can't see Biden.
In the middle of an election season, you want them to criticize the person who was still on the ballot and risk losing. No one does that in politics. That's not an option.
But a
lot of people don't like Trump, but they're not going to criticize him once he's the option.
Sure, you could say it would have been bad politics. Maybe that's right. But also, and that's the other thing the book reveals, is that the concerns go back so much further than any of us thought. That basically, he aged 30 years when Beau Biden died, and he aged another 30 years when Hunter's plea deal fell apart, and there were warning signs, and yes, it's not like everyone in the Democratic Party knew how bad it was and helped keep that quiet. It was being kept quiet from them too. I wish they would have. I think they probably admit now they should have spoke up earlier, because of the disastrous end this came to right before the finish line.
Well, the reports were that Nancy Pelosi was actively involved in saying, you have to step aside. Yeah, yes. But if she is one of the top Democrats that have been there for years, then you understand if for her it was that hard and it became public that she had a rift with Biden, you know how far people were trying to go to get in touch with him. Because what you want to do is start with the source inside of the party and not bring it to the news media outlets. Like, that would be a disaster in what was already a disastrous campaign for a second term. Coming up, President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs hit a major roadblock. We'll discuss next. What's the new story going to be? Democrats didn't do it. Some bad news for President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. A federal court has blocked the Trump administration from imposing those sweeping tariffs under an emergency powers law.
The ruling was handed down at the U.S. Court of International Trade by a 3-judge panel and comes after several lawsuits were brought against the tariffs, arguing President Trump was exceeding his authority.
Meanwhile, Trump had a meltdown yesterday over an acronym the Wall Street Journal is using to describe him and his tariffs. Let's watch.
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. But don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question.
Such a nasty question. Social media had some mixed reactions to the news. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller writes on X, "The judicial coup is out of control."
Midas Touch editor-in-chief Ron Flipkowski shot back at Miller saying, quote, "It's now Marxist to understand that the Constitution only authorizes Congress to impose tariffs." And former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci is saying the ruling is, quote, "why we have checks and balances." Thank you, Anthony Scaramucci. This is going to dramatically affect Trump's tariff power because he went over Congress's head to try to implement something that he interpreted, this 1977 law, as something that he can use against foreign countries over tariffs. And when you skip steps, you get balanced and checked, which is the point of our government. He doesn't have unchecked power, and somebody in his party and outside of his party should let him know that so that we can go about this the right way. I think what he was using this as is a bargaining chip for 18 different countries to say, hey, I'm going to over tariff you, even if you're our allies, make you uncomfortable, give the squeeze to everyone that's in my country that uses products from your country and vice versa. And we're just going to go back and forth with no real game plan or solution. And here we are with the American people feeling a lot of it already, some of it more this summer in June, and no solution. And now our own country making him look silly for these abrupt knee-jerk decisions.
Yeah, fair enough. I mostly agree with you. I'm not a big fan of the tariffs. I'm also not a big fan of just unilateral executive action. It seems obvious to me in hindsight that the dramatic fluctuations in the tariff rates he was proposing unilaterally again were going to exceed his statutory authority. What is Congress for if not to craft things of this nature? And again, this is a theme I frequently return to. Republicans, if you're upset about this and you really want the Trump tariffs and you're in Congress, you have no excuse. You can just do it yourself. Republicans control Congress. Democrats are going to stand in the way. They're going to filibuster. They're going to do whatever. Fine, let them. And then you say, see, we're trying to implement our agenda. Democrats are thwarting us. That's why you need to elect even more Republicans. That's how it works. Things done just by, the signing of a pen can be undone just as easily. So, for all the MAGA world people who are steamed about this, we'll just do it the right way, and then you won't have any problems. Now, I think the tariffs are not a good idea. I was actually really annoyed with that reporter for asking that question because...
What? You don't like taco? Trump always chickens out? She didn't make it up. She's quoted.
So then he's going to do him even harder. Don't say that. Here's how I would say it.
He makes a name up for everybody.
Mr. President, in your wisdom, everyone is talking about how smart you were to bring down those tariff rates and how beautiful you are internally, and the economy is so beautiful. So why are you so smart for not doing tariffs anymore? That's the way you got to do it.
A journalist's job is
everyone's
not
laughing
to
at you and
cozy up to the president and schmooze him and make no. This is a taco. You literally backed down against China. China has. It's really funny. China has decided that they're actually not going to cower in any way. They actually have said they don't know what meetings Trump is referring to when they said they've had conversations on the table. The first time I think they spoke to Trump's team is in Switzerland, I believe, at some conference. And so they are not on the same page. And so China, if they're the biggest, if supposed to be bearing the biggest brunt of this, are actually don't feel like they are. They're just going to go to other countries and trade with them if we can't get it together. And so I think, also people need to know that some of the taxes and the tariffs that Trump imposed on steel and aluminum are still in place because they're under an entirely different ruling. And so that is still going to affect people. So not only will he not get his way with getting other countries, 18 of them, to kind of bend to his will based on using an iron fist, we also are going to see higher prices on things that we buy every day that have aluminum, steel, and other major, cars, everything. So we're still going to see those tariffs go up, and he also didn't get what he wants. So here we are just relying on like the big beautiful bill to solve something, because right now he's almost 6 months in and we don't have any real legislation that we can, I guess, lay our hats on.
We don't have any legislation of any kind because Congress refuses to legislate.
But Congress is all Republican, so what's the issue?
Right. The issue is, well, a couple issues. When it comes to tariff, the issue is, and depending on how you feel about this, again, I'm not for the tariffs. A lot of people in the MAGA faction are. The truth is that the average Republican congressman, in his heart of hearts, does not want the tariffs and does not think they're good policy.
Exactly.
But only a select few, my guys, Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and others, are willing to say that it's bad policy, it's effectively a tax increase, it will hurt small business owners, we shouldn't do them, it's Marxist far-left policy, let's not do them. Every other Republican is afraid, agrees with, not every single one, but most of them.
Use the right word.
Right, they think that, but they're afraid to say so. So they're glad, they're going to be like, oh, activist judges are thwarting our sweet, wonderful president. They're actually glad about it because they don't want it to be their job to thwart the Trump agenda. They know they'll have to do the Trump agenda if it push comes to shove, but they don't want to do this part of the agenda because they don't think it's good policy.
That's a terrible state that we're in, that people can't actually stand up for the things that they ran on, that their constituents believe that they would follow through on. Tariffs are not generally on the Republican agenda as a huge issue. And so
historically, it's been a Democratic policy, more associated with
which is why I'm
Democrats,
confused that these people don't care more about their constituents than they do about appeasing President Trump, who can't even run again.
The coalitions are shifting, right? Labor and blue-collar workers historically were a part of the Democratic Party. Now they are more becoming a part of the Republican Party, so that's changing the economic priorities of the two parties, right? The parties are reforming before our eyes, where the Democratic Party...
I don't agree with that. I think that they're just blindly allegiant to President Trump, and so now they're trying to figure out how to scale back, but being cowardly by not saying anything, so just allowing it all to fall on people like Rand Paul, like you said. I don't think that after Trump leaves, that a traditional or some conservative that falls in lines more within the realm of what we've seen over the last decades will, if they get back in office, people will fall in line to what makes more sense for fiscal conservatives and other things. That's been the biggest issue.
It depends who Trump's replaced with. If the next leader of the Republican Party is a more traditional Republican, then yeah, they'll all be anti-tariff again. They're still anti-tariff. They will proclaim anti-tariff policy. If it's J.D. Vance, though, who is the likely successor to Trump, he's more ideologically pro-tariff even than Donald Trump is. So I don't expect the party to snap back if that's the case. Next up, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that he's revoking the visas of Chinese students. We will discuss that. Stay with us.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio had some bad news for Chinese college students yesterday.
Rubio said in a statement, the U.S. State Department will work with the Department of Homeland Security to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. We will also revise visa criteria to enhance scrutiny of all future visa applications from the People's Republic of China and also Hong Kong.
A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, Mao Ning, responded to Rubio's announcement in a conference. Ning said, quote, "This politically motivated and discriminatory move exposes the lie of America's long-touted claim of being free and open and will only further damage the United States' international image and national credibility."
Earlier in the day, Rubio also announced he would restrict visas on another set of foreigners. He wrote on X, "For too long, Americans have been fined, harassed, and even charged by foreign authorities for exercising their free speech rights. Today, I am announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign officials and persons who are complicit in censoring Americans. Free speech is essential to the American way of life, a birthright over which foreign governments have no authority."
Reporter at Reason, Billy Binion, responded to Rubio on X, writing, quote, "Marco Rubio had someone arrested and jailed over an op-ed."
Well, I have no problem with the order on foreign officials complicit in the American censorship regime. I'm very annoyed by the level of foreign influence over our misinformation advisor, so that's perfectly fine. As for the Chinese students aspect of it, though, here's my issue. Look, I agree that the visa program should serve U.S. national security interests. I think it's fine to, not only fine, it is required to vet foreign students who are going to come here. We should absolutely scrutinize them for criminal associations, terrorist associations, or in the case of China, it's more likely to be, yes, foreign hostile government associations. That's fine. We should continue to do that. But we actually want, for our own national security reasons, in my view, to drain China of its talent. I want the best and brightest engineers from China to come to America and then actually to stay here, not to go back to China. And Trump agrees with me. He said this months ago in the campaign in the All In podcast. He was asked by the tech CEO people, well, if you get if you're a foreign student, you come here, you get a diploma, why would we send you back to China? That makes no sense. And Trump said, I agree. There should be a green card or path to citizenship type thing for those people. We don't want them going back and sharing the education with the Chinese government. Now, if they're actual Chinese government assets, they shouldn't enter the country in the first place. I think we can all agree on that. Yes. But just generally having these students here and serving our country's interests is much better than having them going back to China or remaining China in the first place, right? What am I missing?
Well, I don't think we should take our tariff issues with China out on students that are trying to come here, excel, and eventually, for the most part, enhance the American economy and also enhance the level of knowledge we have in this country and help us get to levels that we haven't been before. That's all students that are going to different universities and coming to our school. But we know that Rubio has been a China hawk for years. He's one of the key proponents in the entire TikTok ban, and he understands exactly what his issues are with China. And I'm not mad at criticizing the foreign officials for trying to silence some free speech, actually. I'm mad at the hypocrisy of it all. I'm actually looking at the selective application of how we honor free speech. You know, you can't say you're defending free speech while also banning foreign students for their views. You can't say that you're supporting free speech and don't like foreign people doing it, but we are cracking down on Harvard because of precisely that. And I think that there's a disconnect between what we actually want to see done and what usually Republicans stand for, which is less censorship, right? And now all the things that the Trump administration is doing, with Rubio being one of the top players, somebody who's even being looked at for potential next president. And so he's really speaking for Trump in everything that he does. And I think that there's just obviously a huge disconnect in what they're trying to accomplish here, because it doesn't look like it's all aligned. And I like consistency. Mm-hmm. I like consistency, and it doesn't seem consistent.
Well, I like consistency very much. We don't really get that from either party. I'm sad to say that I don't think free speech or censorship is a Republican or a Democratic issue. It's just the government is always hypocritical on this. A lot of catastrophic harm was done by the Biden administration. I was almost taken aback by the extent of the social media-based censorship enforced by agents of the government under the Biden administration. I was very glad when President Trump taking office decreed an end to that, said there'll be no more of that kind of thing. That is good. But you're right that the crackdown on students' speech rights, while a little bit murky because students who are not U.S. citizens might not have all the same rights in all the same cases. It's not, immigration is a civil procedure, not a criminal offense. They're shielded in a criminal sense from prosecution because the First Amendment constrains the federal government's behavior on that front. It doesn't mean every single person who wants to come here is just allowed to come here and say whatever they want in all circumstances. There can be, vetting of them for these. There should be vetting of them for these associations. We can make decisions about who gets to come here, but also that's different. Once you're here, there are certain protections you actually have. And so I'm all for doing more vetting to make sure people are only coming here if they're going to serve to strengthen our great nation. I am all on board with that. But I don't think a policy of maximum restriction actually does work in favor of our national security. And I'm becoming just as much of a China hawk as anyone else. It's really a bipartisan issue. It's not. Democrats and Republicans are I think, correctly worried about China's power and influence, and I don't want the next century to be run by China whatsoever. I will not. I cannot have the government that unleashed COVID on us be the paramount superpower. I think that's unconscionable, and we can't let that happen. But in order to combat that without having an all-out war, we need to grow our economy miraculously. We need our tech sector to be as free and empowered as possible, and we're going to need smart young engineers to do that wherever they come from on planet Earth.
And I think part of miraculously growing our economy and investing in ourselves is not trying to go around Congress to implement things that we think will make the future of America better. Mm-hmm. And so tying all the conversation in, that's something that we need to think about. And also, I think when we talk about free speech, we're both for it. Like you said, both parties might go back and forth on it. But when it leans into like the hate speech category, it's something that we need to monitor. And if we are, as Americans, going to other countries and also being the people that are inciters of hate speech, we should be mindful of that. Now, should we be thrown in jail? I'm not sure. It depends on like what the guidelines are and what we guide ourselves by. But I think hate speech has run rampant to unprecedented levels with the introduction of social media. Mm-hmm. And there has to be some kind of I think at least a little bit of protection to make sure that we're not constantly in a cesspool of just bad treatment of each other and really condescension that leads to actual violence.
Well,
so we have to remember that there's like levels.
Speak against that. I don't think the government should do anything about it, but we can disdain the uncivil nature of modern conversation.
So is Trump undermining his own Department of Government efficiency? Hear from his former advisor, Elon Musk, next.
disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing. I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both.
Harsh words there from MAGA darling Elon Musk for President Trump's big, beautiful bill, saying in an interview with CBS that it undermines the work of his government-slashing brainchild, the Department of Government Efficiency.
That big, beautiful bill passed the House with the narrowest of margins and does look to be dead on arrival in the Senate. What's the holdup? Conservative budget hawks like Senators Rand Paul and Rick Scott say it just doesn't go far enough. Here's Scott on the Charlie Kirk Show.
The House bill cuts the spending by less than 2% over the next 10 years. It doesn't balance the budget. It isn't even close to balancing the budget.
Senator, would you say without any changes, at its current composition, would you vote no?
Oh, absolutely, I'd vote no. This bill doesn't have if they brought it to the floor right now, there's not a chance it'll get the 51 votes it needs.
As the debate over reconciliation plays out in Congress, Musk himself is stepping away from Doge. He posted on X Wednesday, "I would like to thank President Trump for the opportunity to reduce wasteful spending. The Doge mission will only strengthen over time as it becomes a way of life throughout the government."
Chair of the Doge subcommittee, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, appears to want to take over the government waste chainsaw. She previewed a new bill in a post on X saying, quote, "I was just told that we're going to see the first Doge cuts bill on Monday. Foreign aid and NPR/CPB on the chopping block. I have not seen the bill yet, but I'm just passing on what they told me." She continued, quote, "As a country, we cannot survive our national debt, and honestly, we may be past the point of return. We should be aggressively attacking our debt and aggressively cutting all waste, fraud, and abuse and unnecessary programs."
In response, Kentucky Representative Thomas Massie, who was one of the Republicans to vote against the big, beautiful bill, had this to say. "It's about time, but I'll believe it when I see it. People need to keep the pressure on Speaker Johnson and the White House to bring the Doge cuts for a vote." Yes, indeed. Look, there's no way around it. Elon Musk is right. And the Doge initiative, which I was wildly in favor of and remain wildly in favor of, it can only be permanent. It can only achieve anything if there is corresponding legislation. This is a theme I know I keep returning to. Probably viewers are getting sick of hearing it, but it's the truth. Congress has to make permanent the cuts, or they're just not going to be permanent at all. And so this was an entirely foreseeable consequence of not having rescission and legislation to back up what Doge was finding. Cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government remains very popular. If you poll it, some of Trump's biggest applause lines at his State of the Union-esque address was when he was calling out certain things in the budget that Elon Musk had identified for deletion. If Republicans stayed laser focused on that and then actually passed legislation that did that, they would be in really good shape, I think. But for a variety of reasons, they just refuse to do their jobs. And then it's left to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie to go, what gives? We promised voters we were going to cut government. Elon Musk did the hard part for us, said here's the part of things, here are the things you should cut, here are the people you should fire. And then the legislation we're being asked to vote on expands the debt. It makes the debt worse. It adds trillions to it. So it's really a damning indictment of government. If Republicans can't get this done now, they'll never get it done. They have as much political power and political capital as they've had ever in my lifetime, except for maybe right after the Bush re-election or something. But they have as much power as they did then, and they're not using it to pass any legislation. It's bizarre.
Imagine if you are somebody who lost their job as a federal employee because you were waste, fraud, and abuse, right? You fell under that category, even though by all standards you were effective at the role, and you felt that Elon Musk completely overstepped his boundaries. And now you have a potential Doge cut bill going through Congress, or not. But more imminently, you have a bill that's going to expand the deficit that's really being forced to push through by the leader of our country, President Trump, and then being forced to make it happen. And they're having multiple conversations. The Senate, House is disagreeing, but this may go through. It may take longer than they thought, which was Memorial Day at first. Obviously, we're past that. But imagine if you're one of the people that was the brunt of these cuts, knowing that just for tax cuts, we're expanding the budget dramatically, but your job wasn't worth saving. So I think that there is a huge discrepancy in what's happening. I understand Elon Musk's plight, but I also think that there's time to review what actual strategy in government looks like. I think Elon Musk was a little bit in over his head. Amazing businessman, obviously has exceeded heights that many people won't reach. But when it came to government, there is a strategy and a formula because it's not a private company. And he didn't learn how to work amongst people and amongst channels that check one another to make sure that what he was doing actually landed and stuck for a long time and made sense to the same American voters that need to keep these people that follow the agendas that he's interested in office. I also think it's interesting because the besties are quarreling, right? The Billionaire Boys Club is breaking down. You don't really see Trump and Elon Musk having disagreements, but he flat out said, this is silly, basically, on that CBS interview. And so this is kind of what we all saw was inevitable. Two people with extremely strong personalities disagreeing about what's happening. Elon Musk probably feeling like a lot of what he spent the last few months doing was a waste of time because every dollar that he spent didn't equal up to what he promised to cut, but also every single dollar that he saved is also going to be now reintroduced to this deficit. And so we really are back at square one, if not in an even worse position if this big, beautiful bill passes. And he said, look, it either could be big or beautiful, but it's not going to be both.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that line in particular. I don't know that it represents a kind of break with Trump on a personal level. I mean, you know, there are allowed to be disagreements. He disagrees with Trump on the tariff policy. He made no secret of that. He called Peter Navarro a nasty name, Peter Navarro being the Trump official who's most responsible for and the biggest advocate of the tariffs. So I don't know that this is a blow to their personal relationship. I think
this is
Elon
his whole
will
legacy in government.
To be
this is Elon Musk's entire legacy. The Doge committee is a failure now because if it literally saved nothing based on that, the
well,
fact
he's
that
going to continue to be a important backer, I think, of Republican causes financially, but perhaps now his attention will be more directed to, honestly, things that matter even more, like space travel. I actually,
his rocket just fell to pieces and
deteriorated. They're supposed to fall to pieces.
What I saw is a fail. I don't know if that.
It's not a failure. They're making miraculous strides. If we become a multi-planetary species, it will be mostly due to the influence of one man.
Or it will be mostly due to the influence of Gail King taking the time to go to space the other day, which I really appreciated more than Elon Musk's rocket busting into smithereens, I mean.
Okay. Trump says Putin's playing with fire, but Russia says Trump is flirting with World War III. Has Trump and Putin's relationship, has that one soured? Stay tuned, more Rising right after this. Russian President Vladimir Putin is playing with fire, according to President Trump. The Commander-in-Chief took to Truth Social Tuesday, saying that Putin doesn't realize that really bad things would have happened to Russia if it weren't for him. That statement, however, didn't sit well with the Russian president. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said in response, quote, "I only know one really bad thing, World War III, and I hope Trump understands this." And then on Wednesday, CNN White House reporter Elena Treen quoted an aide to Putin saying, quote, "Trump says a lot of things," and continued to say that Russian leaders have concluded that Trump is, quote, "not sufficiently informed about what is really happening."
The exchange comes after deadly Russian airstrikes on Ukraine over the weekend that killed at least 12 people. Those continued strikes are happening amid peace talks that have reportedly stalled, and that's prompted Trump to reportedly consider additional sanctions on Russia and escalate his criticism of Putin. Here he is on Wednesday in the Oval Office. Take a look.
Do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out very soon. They seem to want to do something, but until the document is signed, I can't tell you. Nobody can. I can say this. That I'm very disappointed at what happened a couple of nights now, where people were killed in the middle of what you would call a negotiation. I'm very disappointed by that.
Following the airstrikes this weekend, Trump said in a post on Truth Social that Putin has gone, quote, "absolutely crazy." In the same post, he also took shots at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying that, quote, "everything out of his mouth causes problems." It shouldn't be an and situation. He always has to bash Zelensky unnecessarily when Russia is the aggressor. I can't say that enough, that he just finds the time to always condescend. No, but it's just not necessary right now when people in Ukraine are being killed after a 2-hour conversation with President Trump where he said that he was led to believe that immediate peace talks would start. Mind you, they haven't started at all. Putin is completely mocking him at this point.
People are still going to be dying if we say Zelensky's the greatest. He's the Abraham Lincoln of our time.
I think that's egging it on.
Ever. It doesn't. People are going to be dying anyway.
No, Putin's team is dismissing Trump as emotional, saying that he doesn't understand the complexity of the situation. They're mocking him at this point. What happened on that 2-hour phone call that didn't happen in actual real life on the Russia side? Because there's a complete misunderstanding of what Trump actually thought he could accomplish. And even if he said it in jest that he was going to solve this in 24 hours, it's been 6 months almost of 24 hours. He hasn't done anything. Okay, he hasn't done one thing.
He's doing everything he can. He's setting up diplomatic meetings between the parties, and it's very difficult, yes, to bring this war to an end because of the overwhelmingly strong position Russia is in because of the Biden administration's failed policy toward it. The Biden policy was no criticism of Zelensky, as much aid as they want. We are with you. You can win this war. Even as military advisors in the U.S. side and in the Ukrainian side said there is no plan to win this war. It is a hopeless struggle. That became more and more obvious as time wore on. And still, the Biden administration said, no, endless support, don't question it, more money, more weapons. So they drove this conflict on. They could have been and should have been honest with Zelensky much earlier. You can't win this fight. You need to have a negotiated peace. There needs to be a willingness on your side to do that. And there wasn't. They had
not just saying yes to every single thing that Vladimir Putin wants. I think that is then bending the knee. We also have to understand that
they have to bend the knee.
No, because Russia.
If you don't bend the knee,
I think that you are over exaggerating. Like Russia is doing okay, but Ukraine is holding its own. And we are holding up $3 billion in funds that were already approved to Ukraine to continue forward. So if Europe and the U.S. also and Western parts of the world continue to support Ukraine, then they can create a stalemate between Russia.
No, Russia's economy. Every last person in Ukraine.
No, let me finish. Russia's economy is currently under strain. Their oil prices are falling. Their labor is a little bit more scarce than it was before the war, and their inflation is high. They do not want to keep on going. They just want to get what they want, which is 20% of Ukraine, which European allies do not want to happen. So in order to avoid that solution, we can release the funds that were already approved for them and continue to create this stalemate until Putin starts to agree to come to the table for real and not for play. He's just saying things right now. He wouldn't go to Turkey. He wouldn't come to Zelensky in any real way. He wouldn't have a conversation. He talked to Trump on the phone to appease him and then mocked him. His team mocked him as soon as they got off the phone. That's not any real solution either. And blaming Biden is also not a real solution.
Well, there is no, that's the issue. We are now in a situation where there is no good solution other than Russia getting a significant portion of what it wants. We're in no additional amount of pressure or sanctions or aid packages. more money to Ukraine isn't going to do any good. They don't have they're losing so many fighters. There won't be bodies on the ground to use the weapons that we're paying for. They're conscripting well outside normal military range now. There's videos of people being dragged from their homes to be forced into the Ukrainian army. This is illiberal itself, by the way. There are tactics that the Ukrainian government has been finding. Well, they were forced to do it because they're in an emergency. I still don't like them. I don't want to suspend habeas corpus in an emergency, even in the U.S. context. So I'm someone who says even if it's a war, that doesn't mean we don't vote for our leaders and we jail dissenters. We don't do those kinds of things. They're doing all that. Fine. They cannot win. We need to be honest. And that means Russia is going to end up with a chunk of Ukraine, or they're going to end up with all of Ukraine. Those are the two choices. Those are the only choices.
No, Russia is essentially bullying everybody then. As a Russian source told
Correct.
Reuters, quote, peace tomorrow will be even more painful. That translation to me says that if Putin doesn't get what he wants, he's going to keep killing until he does.
Right.
That
correct.
should not be acceptable to the U.S. or Europe.
That's like saying it shouldn't be acceptable that, my hair's getting thinner
No,
and I run a little more slowly. It's just reality. It's of aging. It happens.
Trump's bluff is being exposed. I think that he was unprepared with how to deal with Russia. I think he came into this extremely confident and ran on the fact that he had a great, quote, great relationship with Vladimir Putin. Obviously, he does not. He's not respected in any real way. And so he has to come to the table with a new solution. And the solution is not just cowering in every single way to Russia and saying yes when it makes some of our strongest allies in Europe extremely uncomfortable for Russia to have that much land. Maybe come to the table and figure out how to talk to foreign leaders as opposed to...
Then they can send ground troops. If it's
making
so
Zelensky take the brunt of all the berating.
If France and Germany and the UK think that Russia adding an inch of territory to its nation is an unacceptable
an inch,
assault,
20% of Ukraine?
then they can send our troops.
It's not an inch.
Then let's do World War III. Fine.
No, nobody wants
but
to
they
do
don't
World
believe
War III.
Right, because they know it's not worth it. They know it doesn't matter. If 20% of a country
what's going to
that
stop
has
Russia from
changed
doing
hands
this again?
a million times.
Tell me what's going to stop Russia from doing this again, and what's going to stop from encouraging other countries that this is okay. Let's just start with the first
If
part.
If they attack a NATO country, we will have World War
No,
III.
it's not NATO country. It's Ukraine. So what if they do this all over again in a year or 2 years? So we just are allowing. Yes, we're just going to allow it to keep happening. And if they get all the way, if they take over Ukraine, so you think they're going to own the full of Ukraine someday? We need to just say, just take it now.
Under your policy and Joe Biden's policy,
No,
yes.
that's not my policy. I'm not a politician. I think that that's just a better idea than just allowing Putin to do whatever he wants. But we'll keep talking about this. Next up, President Trump's AI czar blasted Elizabeth Warren over her cryptocurrency stance.
President Trump's AI czar, David Sachs, called out Senator Elizabeth Warren this week.
His complaint centers around crypto regulation. Here's Sachs on Fox News' Jesse Waters Primetime.
What the Biden administration was doing, and let's face it, it wasn't Biden. Elizabeth Warren controlled the auto pen during that administration. She, for some reason, has this pathological hatred of the crypto community. She wants to drive this community offshore. She doesn't want it happening in the United States. That's the wrong policy for the United States. We want all the innovation happening here. This is a financial system of the future. It's cheaper, it's more efficient. We want it happening here, Jesse, and I think people are thrilled that President Trump is making that possible.
Sachs later clarified that Warren was controlling the so-called auto pen only when it came to crypto, as in she was calling the shots during the Biden administration on that policy.
Earlier this year, Warren told reporters, quote, "I believe that Democrats understand the importance of consumer protections and anti-money laundering curbs in any new financial product. All we're looking for is a level playing field between crypto and all of the other financial systems."
Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance was at the Bitcoin 2025 conference where he praised cryptocurrency. Let's watch.
There's still this perception that digital assets are not welcome in the mainstream economy, and let me promise you that our effort to change the policy is purely about changing that. We want our fellow Americans to know that crypto and digital assets, and particularly Bitcoin, are part of the mainstream economy and are here to stay.
On this issue, I am completely aligned with J.D. Vance and Trump. I think cryptocurrency is very promising technology, that it can be a smart investment for some people. It certainly comes with risks. The market for it has gone up and down, and you should, think about what you're getting into. But I don't believe the government's role is to shield people from their own personal financial choices. I am deeply skeptical of Elizabeth Warren as a regulator and a legislator. I think she has, to David Sachs' point, been extremely anti-crypto, extremely against this emerging technology, which, again, other countries will move forward with. And so we obviously need some regulatory framework for crypto. That's going to be worked out. I'm not saying there should be no guardrails whatsoever, but I would encourage regulators to be open-minded to the market development of this technology, which could be an important part of our economy in the future, particularly as people lose trust in the dollar system, in our currency being devalued by runaway inflation and other monetary policies. This could end up one day being an even more stable option. I think it's a great option actually for people in developing economies where there's not a lot of trust in the central currency. You could invest in this instead. But I'm not a salesman for it. If you do it if you think it's a good idea, and don't do it if you don't want to. That's fine by me, and I hope regulators keep all that in mind.
Elizabeth Warren has been consistent in her criticism of big banks, in her criticism of cryptocurrency, and I think she's just simply doing her job as a legislator. She doesn't want to see financial fraud. She doesn't want to see our national security at risk. She doesn't want to see a lack of consumer protections. And so she's just making sure that as we embrace this new currency, we also have protections in place the same way that we do in banks when you put your money there, and that needed to be set up. And so we want to make sure that this is all organized and done, which is why we have a government, right? They're supposed to be protecting us. She's doing her job. I also know that the crypto conversation crosses party lines. So Senator Kirsten Gillibrand in New York, she took a lead role in being on the side of the GOP to try to craft some documentation and bills around this. Yeah, she actually wants to even step aside and maybe fracture party unity to have a conversation about what the next steps are. And I think where Democrats and Republicans get in their own way is by relying on old school tactics and being so establishment that they can't understand what new young people are interested in, what the future looks like. And so importantly, I think there's a conversation that should be had with people like Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Gillibrand to come to the table and figure out what does responsible embracing of cryptocurrency look like. I think that that's a great starting point. But I don't think we should just say, let it in, stop being, like, who says that she doesn't want to do the right thing? Well, what's considered right to me is just making sure that Americans have some type of protection.
Well, but here's the problem with protection, and I appreciate very much what Senator Gillibrand has done. What I don't like about Senator Warren's approach to consumer protection is, right, she'll say, oh, this is fraud, or this financial company or service or business is taking advantage of its customers, and there needs to be, the mechanism is always some kind of fine for that company. Well, guess what? They pass that fine on to the consumers themselves. So the end result of consumer protective legislative action, fines, regulation, is always just that service that people voluntarily signed up for, that they wanted, that they valued, becoming more expensive for them. That's how it works every single time. I think most people would rather not pay more in fees for the thing than have consumer financial protection. That's its end result. And they pass that on to you every single time. The credit card company, the real estate company, whatever the sector is, the tech company, you're just going to end up paying more for the thing. And that's what results from consumer protection. It's a industry, a government industry of making things more expensive for people in the rationale that you didn't actually like or want the service that you willingly signed up for, which I find suspect.
Well, I just think that instead of doing speeches and instead of writing op-eds and all the different things about the people that you disagree with, perhaps people who disagree with Elizabeth Warren should try speaking with her. Perhaps Kirsten Gillibrand and Elizabeth Warren should speak together. We invite her on Rising.
I'd be happy to have either of them on.
And we should have dialogue because I think that crypto should be embraced, but I also think there should be protections around it.
Well, that does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. And in the meantime, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can find podcasts. Friday is around the corner. That will be a different team. We'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye. Have a good one.